It is regarded that Susan Norrie's works are often encumbered with art history references. Namely, the work Model 1, Chardin's Study 2, reproduces Jean-Simon Chardin's painting, Boy with Spinning Top. Chardin depicts a young aristocrat who sits in his father's study while gently gazing at his presumably new object of delight. Fundamentally, it is rather a work that is acclaimed for its grand promotion of Enlightenment thought, signifying the genesis of the application of scientific methods to understanding the world, a rational understanding that prompted the holistic abandonment of religion in the European context. The mechanism of the spinning top, seemingly trivial, demonstrates a man-made control of motion with an effortless gesture. Spinning tops have remained prevalent since antiquity, though within the context portrayed in Norrie's work, demonstrate a shift from play to study. Likened to the further discoveries in physics, the idea of control became a certain ethos in the 18th century. Modernist writer Franz Kafka wrote the satire Der Kreisel, detailing the anguish of a philosopher determined to comprehend the universe entirely based on the movement of the spinning instrument. The philosopher fails to seize the momentum of the top in his hand. Thus, Kafka fittingly ridicules the modern hubris. As par exemplar in Der Kreisel, belief of a man's attempt to control seemingly inferior objects gave light to the manufacturing of apparatuses that harness and considerably manipulate the cycles of nature. Indeed, this major development in the material conditions of our history forms strict, albeit conceptual dichotomies that are ever struggling to be negated and resolved. From the contemporary vantage point, and with formidable retrospect, Norrie's Model 1, Chardin's Study 2 captures her biting wit by taking the spinning top as signifier to the striking transformation of the European perspective. The top is synonymous with the jovial spirit of youth, while simultaneously fragile and inevitably fails to uphold its velocity. Furthermore, Norrie aggressively removes the original color palette of Boy with Spinning Top and dramatically replaces it with a silk screen of a vibrant, albeit sickly green. In this rendition, the spinning top is barely visible, requiring a fixated eye to detect it. Reminiscent of Walpole's signature, the commentary behind Model 1 is clear by this aesthetic association, and in particular with the metaphorical reduction of its physical dimensions. The subject is left flat, dead, and immersed in a weighty contrast between light and dark tones. Beyond the work's overt color saturation, Norrie's focus is particularly noticeable with its crude sweeping motion as part of its construction. With such an operation by the material application of silk screening, Norrie retracts Chardin's discernible esteem towards his boy subject, and in doing so, Norrie insists on our own affected hesitation towards the work. It's rather a literal removing, or to say the least, the tampering of the subject's essence, and through the medium, evokes to represent something entirely new. From this graphic rendering, it is without question that Norrie explicitly confronts the beginnings of our modern history. Taking Norrie's assessment further, the counterpoint to Model 1 is a collection of found objects titled Model 4. The work comprises of a lacquered shelf with a replica spinning top sitting adjacent from a glass eye bath. The spinning top, found in both works, is brought to the fore from 2 to 3 dimensions. It is sitting motionless, fashioned with ebony, and with a penetrating sharp point to hold its axis in position once set in motion. Without the vivacious, chromatic spins as in the commonplace imagining of the instrument, Norrie's top is stationary and thereby entirely a passive object, nonetheless appears considerably as a weapon. Norrie crafts an arresting corporal sensation, instigating fantasy of one pricking the eye with the needle. The imagined wound, pouring with blood, and doubtless one is now blinded, desperately seeks the eye bath for relief. The visceral notion, merely provoked by two laden weights, hints at the Cartesian schism between body and mind, with a violent destabilized relationship between the polarities, rather antithetical components of an equilibrium. Perspective, in its physical embodiment, is now changed, with one side privileged over the other. In this instance, Norrie addresses the complete restriction that charged the Enlightenment rationale, and in the way greatly inhibits the fluidity of human subjectivity. Model 1, Chardin Study 2, and Model 4, by their titles, indicate two works are distinguished from a series. The exhibition Room for Error occurred in Wellington in 1994. Exercising installation components, Norrie flirted with the dialectics of past and present, with a call and response style in its ensemble. Norrie shifts her study as an interplay between the sensory, the optical, and the performance of intellectualization. With a multi-dimensional veneer, Norrie, without relying on obtuse moralizing, portrays the light and shadow of her subjects. Paintings were mounted alongside wooden cases that enclosed the objects of interest. Furthermore, the gallery produced a neoclassical facade with allude to the legacy of Enlightenment theories that privileged the rational. Such a transformation in thought fueled the changes in perception to the extent of promoting the imagining of so-called Western dominance. With respect to Model 1 and Model 4, we observe before us the aesthetic and events of the 18th century that was savagely interrogated. The dialogue of ideas between painting and objects, and alongside its curation, gave way for spectator commentary, interpretation, and provocation.
The first time Lee Kinsella, the curator of the Cruthers collection, introduced Susan Norrie's BCENU Dance of the Dead painting to me, I remember feeling restless, like the painting was interrupting my ability to see. When I invited fellow students to give me their first impression of the painting, they said it felt eerie and melancholy, and I noticed that they too acted as if there was a barrier before the painting. Each painting in the BCENU series depicts Port Meirion. This town in Wales was designed to mimic seaside Italy and is both a tourist destination and the site where the dystopian television series The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGoohan as Number 6, was filmed. Some of the paintings in the series are named after episodes of The Prisoner, and the title BCENU is an iconic phrase from the show. To make further sense of what I had discovered, I delved deeper into Norrie's practice from the early 2000s to enhance my understanding of the creative explorations Norrie was making at the time of the BCENU series, with hope this would unveil the secrets within Dance of the Dead. In 2007, Norrie's video installation Havoc was shown at the 52nd Venice Biennale. Havoc documented the aftermath of the 2006 mud volcano eruption in Indonesia. This disaster permanently displaced the communities who had lived in the 13 villages that were buried during the eruption. Norrie returned to investigate these events and the lives affected by the disaster almost a decade later, releasing Aftermath, which documented this return in 2016. Having collected all this information and returning to the work itself, something truly had shifted in my experience as a viewer. The flatness, the oiliness, and the blur of the surface that made the painting so difficult to see became the only things I saw. I saw threads of climate disaster, of dystopia, of replication, and from this work I was able to have broad conceptual discussions about people and our interactions with place. My frustration towards the world had been captured and given back to me in the experience of my first encounter with Dance of the Dead. After the time I have spent with this painting, I think I understand why it is so difficult to approach at first, and I respect the painting for the time it demands from us and the lessons it has to teach us if only we would give the moment to listen. Nevertheless, as these are questions I have pondered over, I want to ask Susan Norrie, why create a work that keeps the viewer on the outside? And also, what does We See in You Dance of the Dead tell us about our place in the world?